think that is what my next brave guest whistleblower is showing. Karen Stewart, who was with the National Security Agency as an intelligence analyst. That's the big dog in the intelligence community. If you don't know, it's not the CIA, it's the NSA. And she was fired just after I was fired in 2010 for exposing their sinful, murderous criminal activity. So, Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor.
Honor to have you, sister. Welcome to the Whistleblower Club. Keep your faith. It's going to tear up your immune system, but you're going to come out of this. My wife said this to General Flynn with the She said, he went through this a decade ago at the DA, which you just went through, and God will take care of you, but it's not fun to go through. And keep your faith and keep your immune system. And thank you so much for coming on. To have you on, especially with the NSA. I've worked with the NSA a lot, had a lot of classes for the NSA deploying, and I'm pretty familiar with some of their stuff. But I understand you had a very high-level job referencing, I saw some of your credentials there, referencing national intelligence estimates. Those are big deals when those are put out. But could you just kind of review your credentials briefly to establish your legitimacy through your authenticity?
Well, in college, I decided I wanted to try to work for the intelligence community. My dad was retired military intelligence, and with my vision problems, I wasn't going to be military. So I went for the intelligence community. I studied several different foreign languages and applied to NSA. They did a thorough background investigation, and as I like to say, found me very boring and very hireable. No drugs, no anything like that. And I started my career there in 1982. I didn't get into trouble somehow until later in my career when I actually did a 6-month series of reports that got kudos, and the Pentagon actually verified that the reports had saved about 2,000 lives. And I had that report hijacked and used to give a double promotion to a woman who was sleeping her way through the managers above me. So when I asked about that, all hell broke loose, and they started to defame and actually stalk and harass me using NSA security. And they ended up, I think the stalking and harassment went from 2006 to 2009 when they put me on administrative leave. I hired a lawyer to sue them. And in 2010, they fired me against the EEOC judge's orders. And that's when I found out, well, a little bit before that, but that's when I found out about NSA and other federal agencies using the FBI fusion centers as vengeance for hire entities. Now, the fusion centers were created after 9/11. You had heads of various intelligence agencies, including NSA, telling the Congress, we don't know what happened. It was an intelligence failure, but we think that if you give us a place in each state, some kind of center where we can fuse information from the national level down to the local level, we can head off these kinds of terrorist attacks. And so at this point in time, after 20 years, there are 80 fusion centers all over the United States. It is a network. And they supposedly are watching for terrorist plots, trying to identify terrorists, et cetera, et cetera. And so far in 22 years, they have found not one terrorist, not one terrorist group, not one terrorist plot, and stopped no terrorist plot whatsoever. And Congress is asking them, what are you doing with the billions of dollars that we give you? And they refuse to tell them. They basically say, you don't have the clearance, so we're not telling you, which is insane. But what they have done is they have created a tier 3 and tier 4 level terrorist list of regular Americans, and they call them non-investigative subjects. Well, if these are dangerous people, why are you not investigating them? Why would they be non-investigative subjects? Well, because they're fraudulently put on tier 3 and tier 4. And then they are defamed. the NSA, the Fusion Center operatives go throughout the neighborhood, show their shiny little badges, and tell them we have a problem in your neighborhood. You know, John Smith is, we think he's a terrorist, and he has predilections for pedophilia and all kinds of other stuff. And they scare the heck out of these civilians who don't have any idea that they're lying. They do create false dossiers right and left. There are hundreds of thousands of false dossiers. And once they target you, they never let go. They actually go through the neighborhood, tell them, we need you to do this, this, and this to them. And it can be quite petty. Like, Tim, you have to go over and slit John's tire, every Tuesday morning, for $100, we'll give you a gift card. But they can also basically enlist the neighbors to allow or to participate in hitting these people with electromagnetic weapons. These are the types of weapons that hit our diplomats, and they can be quite devastating. They go through almost anything and everything, and you can see my face is swollen. I mean, I'm old, but my face is still swollen from these weapons hitting my home 24/7. And of course, police don't have any idea what you're talking about, or they're told to butt out. Well, like I said, they've turned into vengeance for hire entities, but they are into human trafficking, and they get, and I'm going to call it contracts on people, because NSA basically went to them and said, hey, we have a problem. This woman is suing us. Maybe they admitted it or not. We stole her work and awarded it to a woman who was sleeping her way through the weapons and space management. Maybe they admit it. I don't know. Or maybe they had an entirely different story, but they put out a contract on me and they said, okay, this was to the Florida people. And so they went through the neighborhood. I was staying with my parents, actually, because they were in their 80s and needed some help. And I was waiting for my EEOC case to come up. So they went through the neighborhood defaming me, surprise to me. And I ended up getting stalked and harassed. And I think Bill Binney calls it cast iron coverage, which means if you leave your home, somebody is watching and beeps their horn, a warning like she's leaving or she's coming or whatever. And then you have 2, 3, 4, 5 cars kind of pile on and follow you everywhere you go, sometimes just making their presence clear, sometimes impeding where you're going, other times causing car accidents. So this is not surveillance. This is minute by minute harassment. And what they want to do is take this troublesome, inconvenient person and blame them with some kind of crime, put them, like you said, in a loony bin by saying, you're crazy, nobody would do this. Well, they've had this going for 20 years. They've had this program going for 20 years, and they have not only trained the FBI and Fusion Center operatives to do these types of idiocies, but they train and pay through gift cards, third card gift cards, neighbors, townspeople. They even enlist the help of certain crime gangs, because the crime gangs will do certain things that a civilian will say, no, I really don't think I want to kill her dog, So they go through different groups in a town. They tell them different lies to get them enraged. And then they put them on a schedule and say, okay, well, your church can stalk and harass her for the next 6 weeks, and then we'll move on to the PTA. So they have civilians highly invested because they want to believe this particular person is a terrible person, or else why would they be doing this to them? But it doesn't occur to them, this has no due process, and the person has no chance to prove themselves innocent. But they're invested in the money. And I think a little voice tells them if this isn't legitimate, they're in big trouble. So they better believe it's legitimate and the government can actually do this to people. So they're doing this all over the country. I mean, if you move from Iowa to Michigan, you're going to get car stalked. And once you get to Michigan, they're going to go through the neighborhood and get them to do the same things to you. If you pick up and move to Texas, they're going to do the same things. I mean, it is a highly professional network of harassers. And there are people who are actually making their living doing this. And I was shocked when I saw a video from another targeted individual, which is what we end up calling ourselves because I believe they started calling us that first. So a TI or targeted individual. But he filmed some guy following him around a grocery store, and he said, by the way, how much do you get? And I was rather shocked in that it was a lot of money, a lot for a no skill job of criminal harassment. So there are people who are totally invested, and they do go to the authorities, and the authorities either tell you, "Oh, you're crazy," or they say, "Sorry, we can't help you." In fact, I went to a sheriff's department in Florida, and I told the duty officer what was going on. I said, I've called. I've tried to explain. I've sent you explanations via email, and I get basically ignored or insulted. This is going on, and I am getting health damage. A lot of us do. Vision destruction, basically bleeding in the brain, heart drying out from being cooked, all kinds of things that are very, very unique health problems that you would not or could not possibly get without being exposed to electromagnetic weapons continuously. You just wouldn't get these problems. But I went to this duty officer, told him, and he said, "What is your name again?" And he said, "Come on, follow me to the parking lot." And he went to looked like a private car, maybe his own personal sedan. And he opened the trunk and he took out a handful of folders. And he said, there you are. He said, and he opened it up and read a little bit. And he said, "I'm not allowed to help you." Meaning you don't have any civil or constitutional rights. I'm not allowed to help you or take a report. Sorry, bye.
Yeah.
What you're seeing right now is where I worked. It was the NSA Weapons and Space Directorate, and that was the project that I was on. It was to detect jammers that the Russians were actually selling the Iraqis to make our weapons during our invasion go off course, and that could have killed a lot of people. So I spent about 6 months doing those reports, and only to be punished with people trying to kill me for actually trying to claim my own work. But the electromagnetic weapons, here I will tell you something that not a lot of people know. In Florida, the electromagnetic weapons were supplied to the fusion centers by the Naval Security Group in Panama City. They are under the NSA/CSS. And I actually have a picture of one of the people who was photo stalking me from the Navy. And I have a license plate, but I can't find anybody who actually cares enough to investigate and question them as to why they're trying to help murder civilians. But they would bring over the anti-personnel size weapons, and they were bringing some bigger ones, but let's go with the anti-personnel size weapons. They would pass them out to neighbors. They would pass them out to certain people who were on schedule to stalk and harass you, like Billy Bob and Sue and Joe and William were scheduled to stalk and harass you every Tuesday morning from 8 to noon. They'd sit on the side streets if you stayed home, but if you went somewhere, they would follow you and use these anti-personnel weapons on you as you drove, or follow you into stores with them in a backpack or a large bag or something like that and aim it at you inside the store. And their policy was to try to hit you from at least 3 different directions, which was rather dangerous for some of the people in the stores because some of those weapons were actually embedded in the car engine as well. And so if you had a V8, V6, V4, excuse me, it had the strength of the engine. So they could have killed people in the store who had like pacemakers and other delicate health conditions, but that was their protocol. That's how they did it. They wanted to hit you 24/7 as much as possible to poison your cells, wear you down, and make you die from what they hoped would look like natural causes. Now, what you're showing right here is a Raytheon Raven's Claw device, excuse me, that can actually target by frequency any of the organs in your body. I was actually sent to the ER with them targeting one of my kidneys. I originally thought that I had a kidney stone. But when I got there and waited for them to do the x-ray and get back to me, there was a doctor who came back and said, okay, here's your kidney stone. It should be out in the next week. Oh, I see you've had an organ removed. I said, no, I never have. Can you be born without whatever organ is missing? And he said, no, you can't. So this isn't your x-ray. So I surmised from that what they were doing was they were putting nano into me as a painkiller because I had an IV. And after that, my sensitivity to the directed energy weapons going through the house was much increased because what they do is that they catch and reflect back into your body the frequencies you're being hit with. And you can be hit with weaponized Wi-Fi. And I'm not going to, I can't tell you all the different types, but there is pulsed microwave, like you have heard in basically concerning the diplomats. There are a multitude of other types and variations of the weapons they have. One thing is heterodyning. Well, what is heterodyning? They can hit you with an extraordinarily high-pitched sound that sears through your brain. And heterodyning would be not just picking a frequency and hitting you from 3 different directions with it, but heterodyning would be a couple of different frequencies that really exacerbate the damage each other will give you. So that is that's like having something sear through your head. And one of the ways that they basically lock into you gives you tinnitus. And they're saying now that tinnitus actually can cause brain damage. So they are all about the brain damage, all about destroying your life, destroying your mind, destroying your ability to testify against them.
Which goes along with saying you're crazy, which is something the NSA likes to do a lot. And of course, is it so? Karen, please continue. And would you agree with me that now everybody is being targeted through the jab and the booster systems with the mRNA, so they can target genetically and biologically almost anyone they want all the time, anytime?
I absolutely agree. I mean, I speak mostly about the electromagnetic weapons because that's what I'm being hit with. But I have spoken to hundreds of people, if not thousands, but hundreds who tell me that they also use DNA-specific poisons, gases. Um, it sounds like it's a smorgasbord. Once you're on this list, then they're free to target you for experimentation, for non-consensual experimentation, because secretly what they've done by listing you as a terrorist is to secretly strip you of your constitutional, civil, and human rights. And if you remember, Bush said, we'll hunt you down and kill you wherever you are. We don't care, what country you're in. We reserve the right to just murder you. They have interpreted that as, hey, if we're calling them terrorists and stripping them of their rights, why kill them all at once? Why don't we just use them to experiment on and test our weapons on? I mean, after all, there is a new electromagnetic weapons war, weapons race. So why not just use it on these people who don't count? We've erased them. you know. So we are human trafficked. They make money off of us. And I would say that not only do the contractors basically get in there and say, hey, could you just go ahead and declare like 20 people to be terrorists so we can experiment on them with this new device? But they also seem to be contracted by powerful, influential people who say, my cousin Fred, he's going to be a co-inheritor and I don't want him to live. So my rich uncle is going to die, and I don't want my cousin to have any of it. So why don't you put him as a terrorist and get rid of him? There's one woman that I met who was put on the list because she refused someone's sexual advance, and now she's on the list for life. So if people say, well, I didn't work for the government, I certainly didn't work for the intelligence community, I should be safe, it's not my problem. No, it is your problem. And it could be your mother's problem, your sister's problem, your son's problem, your grandchild's problem. So the fusion centers I've described as Trojan horses. They're supposed to be doing one thing when they are entirely doing another. They are attacking the people that they are supposed to be protecting. So the fusion centers need to be frozen, shut down, audited, and the people in the domestic terrorism unit especially need to be apprehended and questioned as terrorists. Now, I will say that there were people in my parents' neighborhood who seemed to be going house to house to house, and at any of the houses they stayed at for a long time, there seemed to be weapons that started to emanate from there. I found out those people were Fusion Center employees, and specifically FBI Annie White and Mr. Kennedy, who I don't really know if he's FBI or Fusion Center, but they were the ones who were leading the attack on me to murder me for no reason other than NSA said, "Could you murder her?" So, I mean, I have specifics, but nobody seems to want to investigate. But I just wanted to make it clear, if these things are not shut down, it will affect your family. It will affect your wife, your husband, your friends.
Yeah, I've talked to moms whose kids have been killed by task force members, which I would say are fusion members. Let's show some of those photos of, again, of the vehicles with emanations where you've actually photographed, and the distortions. It's showing the vehicle distortion that you have documented, and because you're a subject matter expert in this, showing the electromagnetic field distorted by the projected weapon. And of course, there's multiple levels to verify that this is happening. Electromagnetic Faraday bags, Faraday curtains. It looks like you've got some there. What else should people and can people do?
Oh gosh, I mean, if you end up being targeted, one of the first things you do, because I ended up collecting a lot of material that would reflect or absorb some of this. Had I known more at the beginning, the first thing I would have done was paint my house with the electromagnetic field paint. That would be the most effective and the very first thing to do. I mean, there are all kinds of junk objects that will help you. I mean, believe it or not, aluminum screening helps mitigate the Wi-Fi weaponry. There's Teflon, believe it or not, Teflon that will reflect. Charcoal absorbs heat. There's just all kinds of things that you can get from, and I'll give you a list that you can get from Lowe's or Home Depot, but it junks up your house, and it is not pleasant. It's not pleasant to live that way. So we need people with the Rydberg sensors. Those are sensors the military has that detects not only these weapons, but they source them. I mean, it doesn't do you any good to say, yeah, your house is getting hit pretty hard, but we don't know where it's from. But the Rydberg sensor will show you, oh, it's the house there over on the left. So we need help with that. Thank God there are these devices, but we don't have access to them yet. And I would tell people there is a committee on the weaponization of government against Americans. We have been trying to tell them this is a serious concern, as well as everything else they're looking into. And they need a specific task force for the targeted individuals, the victims of FBI fusion centers. And they need it now before more people are burned in their beds. And I'm talking second to third degree from Wi-Fi, weaponized Wi-Fi and other weapons, and killed. There was one man in Arizona who was trimming his hedges. He was hit with a horrific weapon, brought to the hospital. His arms turned black. And just before they could amputate his arms, he died. And doctors and sheriffs and police are being told to shut up about it, or else you'll be next.
Well, the law.
Yes, if sheriffs will take their duty to uphold the Constitution seriously and arrest or get rid of federal agents who are there to break the law. The Committee on the Weaponization of Government is also, I mean, that's not all of Congress, but there are a handful of people who are really interested in helping, and I'm concentrating on them. And I think it is a good idea to concentrate on the sheriffs who are constitutional sheriffs and have them influence their legislatures to give them the laws they need to react to this. I think you're right. There was a patriot, a head of a patriot group that contacted me and said, I know this is happening, but what can we do to help you? We don't want to be hit like this. And I said, well, if you get the information out and some of these people that you know who are patriots have been induced to commit crimes against people they're told are terrorists, and you tell them, no, they're not terrorists. What is it these people are telling you? And give us that information. Again, whistleblower. we could use that very much. And there is a targeted justice um, lawsuit in Houston, Texas against DOJ, DOD for doing this to people, and they are challenging the tier 3, tier 4 concept that we can put people on the watch list for nothing. So that's an over $1 billion
And
lawsuit that's test the waters. But
well,
thank you very much for having me on. This is very important for the American people to know because we are under attack and we are not terrorists.